Welcome to another Zoom call. We have a number of questions that got sent in. Just another friendly reminder to everybody, look at the announcements on the homepage of your member site. And please, still getting people emailing questions. Feel free to email any labs, any tests you have had done, any new information like that, that may be just a statement to put in your file or in your notes. But questions need to be asked on the member site if all possible. We cannot be emailing answers back for legal reasons. And then remember, you have access to all the Zoom, all our courses. First question that came in, is methylene blue a good thing to take? I take 6 drops under my tongue and then put it on Theralumin, which is like an infrared wash. I know Dr. McCullough is really big on methylene blue. It can have some benefits against parasites. It can have some benefits against viruses. We don't carry it, and I typically don't recommend it. Though, there's more and more functional medicine doctors that are using it. I don't think there's anything wrong in taking it. It's not something I use, so I can't comment too much on that. I read that fasting naturally increases HGH, which is human growth hormone, in this article written by a functional medicine doctor. I know in your blog it says not to take human growth hormone because it causes cancer to grow and interferes with apoptosis. How is it that HGH generated by fasting is good for cancer? Does fasting also increase IGF-1? Just curious as to the difference. So yes, fasting can increase all sorts of different growth factors. It does increase IGF-1 production too, but typically only after you fast. At least the studies that I've written is after you do a 24-hour fast. So anything fasting less than 24 hours, typically we tell people is perfectly fine for cancer patients. If you're fasting more than 24 hours, you do risk raising your IGF-1 levels and other growth hormones as well. That's part of the benefit of fasting if you don't have cancer. So if you don't have cancer and you're going on and you've done some fasting, we never say to go on a 3-day fast or 7-day fast or 10-day fast or longer than that if you've never fasted at all. Fasting is something you need to work into. We have had cancer patients that have done a 21-day fast or a 10-day fast prior to starting with us, or even after starting with us, and they seem to do real well. So there's the hard evidence that's out there is that after 24 hours of fasting, you do raise human growth hormone levels and IGF-1 levels. Therefore, we tend to tell people that you should limit your fast to less than 24 hours. That's typically our advice on fasting. When we were talking to the nurse at the oncologist's office, we asked about cancer feeding off of sugar. She said she thought that was a myth because they've had out-of-control diabetics survive cancer. She said that if it were true that cancer feeds on sugar, all diabetics would have cancer and no diabetics would ever survive it. I know there's a flaw with this reasoning, but don't know what it is. I was curious to know how to respond to that. Well, first of all, I would not take a dogmatic position that all cancer feeds off of sugar directly. But to say that cancer doesn't feed off of sugar is literally to say that you don't understand basic human physiology that you learned, maybe you forgot, but you learned this in 7th grade biology. So you learned about glycolysis in 7th grade biology, and glycolysis takes place in all cells, and this is how you make energy. Remember ATP? So glycolysis takes a glucose molecule, breaks it down into ultimately into acetyl coenzyme A that goes into the Krebs cycle. Remember those terms from 7th grade biology? Every cell makes energy that way. So does cancer cells. Cancer cells actually can feed off of what's called an anaerobic cycle. So ultimately, glucose goes through glycolysis and makes lactic acid at the end. Well, actually, it converts to lactic acid, and cancer cells in an anaerobic environment can feed off of lactic acid. It's really an inefficient way to make energy because you make a lot more energy when it converts to acetyl coenzyme A and goes into the Krebs cycle, and you really kick out the ATP. But cancer cells can be damaged, especially if they have HIV1 defects in their genes that are converting the end plate of glycolysis into acetyl coenzyme A. Not to get too technical, but to say that cancer doesn't feed off of sugar is really saying that you don't understand basic physiology. Every cell will feed off of sugar. But if you want to get even more technical, cancer cells can feed off of other things as well. They can feed off of proteins, typically amino acids, methionine, glutamine, lysine even. The cancer can be gobbling up iron as a fuel source. So cancer is trying to make energy in order to continue its replication. But cancer cells are damaged. So does everybody that has cancer have to go on a ketogenic diet? No, because not all cancers are feeding mainly directly off of glucose. But all cells do use glucose for a fuel. So cancer cells certainly use glucose as a fuel too. To say that out of control diabetics would survive cancer, this also tells you that this nurse is not understanding what diabetes is. So diabetes isn't that you have excess glucose in the bloodstream because you eat way too much glucose. Diabetes is that you have excess glucose in the bloodstream because it can't get into the cells. So the disease of diabetes in adult onset type 2 diabetes is that cancer, the glucose can't get in the cell because the receptors on the outside of the cell membrane are damaged, and all your cells are reproducing damaged receptors on the outside of cell membrane, so the glucose can't get inside the cell. Therefore, there's excess glucose circulating in the bloodstream. That's what diabetes is. It could begin because a person had a poor diet and ate way too much sugar, but a person could actually have a good diet, not eat very much sugar at all, and end up with a type 2 diabetes and excess blood sugar. Type 1 diabetes has to do with an insulin deficiency because of an autoimmune disease in the pancreas, what's damaging the production of insulin. Therefore, they can't get the glucose inside the cell. So in order for glucose to get inside the cell, you need insulin made by the pancreas, and you need healthy cell receptors for glucose. Whenever you have an issue with one of those, you can end up with excess blood glucose. So to say that out of control diabetics would never survive cancer because cancer is fed off of glucose, you're not understanding either. You're both not understanding physiology, and you're not understanding that what diabetes is. So diabetes is that the glucose can't get inside the cells. So it's really shows, I don't want to be mean, but it really shows this person's complete ignorance. Apologize. Can you explain why tamoxifen is bad? So tamoxifen is an aromatase inhibitor. It is a very effective aromatase inhibitor. It works really, really good. So I wouldn't say tamoxifen is bad. Um, it does its job quite well in getting rid of all estrogens in your body. So it's the only thing that would be quote unquote bad about it is that it does its job quite well and get rid of all estrogens in your body. So you're getting rid of, your good estrogens, not just your bad estrogens, and you could get a lot of symptoms because of that, because hormones are in your body for a reason. And remember, it's really the 4-hydroxy esterones that are really attaching to the estrogen beta receptors on the cancer cells and discouraging apoptosis. It's not the esterones or all your other estrogen metabolites or your progesterone metabolites that are causing issues with the estrogen beta receptor. So tamoxifen isn't specific to only the 4-hydroxy esterones. It's taking away all your estrogens, and in doing so, it could give you a lot of symptoms. Can you explain why mammograms are bad? Well, it's, in my opinion, mammograms, are a lot of radiation for the information that you receive. So if I was a woman and I wanted to examine where if I had breast cancer, I would certainly do, if I didn't know I had cancer, I would certainly do a thermography to do some screening. So using mammograms with the radiation that you're exposed to in a screening tool, I think is not a wise practice of medicine. Using mammograms after you already know you have cancer increases your risk for a number of things because your breast is squeezed between those two plates. You could damage, you could actually, damage a encapsulated tumor and cause it to spread. You're also radiating that for no reason. It's not a treatment level of radiation. You're damaging cells. Increased number of mammograms via or a screening tool can increase a person's risk of cancer just due to the rad exposure of radiation. So you got to look at any test and go, what's the value in this test? What's the information that's gained from this test? And then do I have to balance that value of that test to the risk of that test? Just like, people ask, well, I don't want to do a CT scan because it has radiation. Well, I get that, but there can be the value of the information that you'll gain from that can outweigh the risk. So there's times to do a CT scan. There's time, I don't want to do an MRI because of the gadolinium and I don't want that dye and that's not good for me. I get that, but then you got to weigh out, is the value of the information that you're going to gain from that test worth the risk of the radiation or of the gadolinium, and you got to weigh that out and deal with that. That's why I always said, if you're going to do a test that is more invasive, that has side effects that come with it, then you have to ask yourself some questions. Well, is the information that I gained from this test going to change the way I'm going to treat my body? Is it going to change the way the course that I'm going to treat? Maybe I'm going to, if the information came back positive, I may do a course of radiation or chemotherapy. If the answer is yes, I might do that. Well, then the information outweighs the negativity, then go ahead and do the test. So those are the things you have to weigh up in doing any test. Is the ketogenic diet critical for bladder cancer? Typically, no. I don't know. The person asked this question, I don't know what we tested you on as the cause or the dietary driver of your cancer. But certainly, even if you've been following that well and your cancer is growing, there's certainly nothing wrong with trying a different diet and go on, ketogenic is, I wouldn't say it's necessarily a radical diet, but it's a much more difficult diet to follow. But it's certainly nothing wrong with going on nobody's going to be injured by going on a ketogenic diet. The only thing that I would say is if we found that your cancer is driven by proteins, typically a ketogenic diet is going to be high in proteins. So you are risking, that. But again, if your cancer is growing and you want to make some changes, cancer can morph and change, and sometimes it's good to try a different diet like that and give it a try for a month and see if there's any shrinkage of the cancer, because cancer is constantly trying to morph and change its fuel source. So I don't think there's anything wrong with trying a ketogenic diet if your cancer is going the wrong way. Is it necessary to do anything else other than the homeopathic you recommend to mitigate the effects of CT PET scans? Does the Rife have any helpful things to do? And if so, how often do you do this? And do you do it pre and post scans? So the homeopath, you can start taking it before the scan. You can start taking it at any time. So if you don't have, everybody's got radiation in their body anyhow, so it'll help your body pull that out. But again, it's a homeopath. It doesn't work quickly. There's nothing else you can really do to chelate that out. If you're using a dye, then you can use some other chelators like different binders, like the clear binder, or Pectisol C can be helpful. That can be beneficial. Anything with the Rife, I'd say the Ion Pro Wave, the foot bath, doing the clear line detox would be helpful, but you don't start that till afterwards. And you've probably been doing some of those already, but doing the clear line detox once a day can be helpful for that, for sure. Oh, this was a lot of questions in one question, so I had to make it small. Just an update, I've had my first 3 of 6 RGCC vax prep injections. I'm on my 2nd week off, and next week start up again for the next 4 of 6 injections. My ankles have been swollen for the last 3+ days. I started using the Rife swelling program a few days ago. They are still swollen. Last month, they were swollen for about a week. Didn't use the Rife and it went away. What might be causing my ankles to swell? So usually when your ankles are swelling, it has to do with you start thinking of salt intake. That can cause some swelling of the ankles. Heart function is one of your first things you think of with swollen ankles. Any impingement of clothing or sitting for a long period of time, your ankles drain through the lymph system to the inferior vena cava that goes back to the heart, through the iliac veins that come through your groin area. So if there's any impingement in that area, it could cause ankles to swell. If that is a problem after that doesn't go away, you certainly would be wise to get your heart checked out too. You can always have a comorbidity. You always have the ability to have more than one thing going on. I know when you're dealing with cancer, everything you think of is tied to cancer. For several weeks each morning when I wake up, I feel pretty good, but within 2 hours, I'm exhausted. So I do not have much activity. I have been running the Rife Energy and Vitality program and have not noticed any change. Remember, your lymph system drains by action of your muscles. Your lymph system doesn't drain by action of your heart. So this might be tied to the last question above. So just trying to move your ankles, even if you're sitting in a lazy boy chair, start writing the alphabet with your feet, getting motion in there. Even if you're tired, try to stand up and do some leg lifts or some type of simple exercises. can be helpful, can get motion. Motion is the key. Motion is the key to life. Just always remember that. So when you're not moving because you're sitting at a computer all day working, like sometimes I am, or you're just exhausted and you're laying down all day, that can lead to worse problems. So you want to get up and move around, do some squats, do a little bit of exercises, do something to move your body. Just simple little calisthenic type exercises. It doesn't have to be something aerobic. It just needs something that's increasing motion can be really helpful. In the past 3 weeks, I've developed a dry cough. Suggestions for getting rid of that. Could this be from the purging odor of the tumor? Maybe. I'm concerned about your lungs. When anybody has a cough, I'm concerned about your lungs. Go back to the home page of the member site and look at the recipe for nebulizing hydrogen peroxide. And again, that is just a great thing to do for any issues that's going on in your lungs. If you got any fungal infection, any pneumonia issues, remember, the one of the main causes of comorbidity with cancer is pneumonia, and it's oftentimes undiagnosed pneumonia. So you don't want that to start happening. So go back and think about nebulizing hydrogen peroxide for your lungs. My skin is purple on my right collarbone area and below my neck. This person did send me photos where the collarbones meet. The skin is starting to flake off and is very thin. Any suggestions so the skin doesn't break open? What about hemocrucium and carrier oil? This is a oil that a person could get from, from their if they're using a what am I trying to think of the words here? Essential oil company. So you could get that from Young Living. You could get that from an essential oil company that you might be going through to use an essential oil. And this can be good for skin issues as well. I would also think of just using olive oil or coconut oil on it can be beneficial as well. That can be beneficial for your skin. We have a comfrey oil, comfrey salve that can be really good. We have some new salves that you might want to look at that are really nice. That can be really good for your skin. Matter of fact, we have a holiday skin special that you might want to look at too. Can you please send me my genetic results on the variants? Yes, I actually sent those to you twice already, and I just sent you them again today. But you have that blocker on your email, and I always have to put in, my name and information so the email will go through. Maybe that's why it's not going through. So I already sent it to you 3 times. If you didn't get it, please let us know. We'll try it again. Can prednisone affect tumor markers? I don't know. I haven't seen any data that prednisone will change tumor markers, but I just doubt if there's ever been a study on it. So I don't know. So tumor markers are essentially different enzymes that your body cells give off, not just cancer cells. So you notice if you've ever had done tumor markers that there's a normal range. Well, the normal range is there because it's normal in your body to have those markers too, and we call them tumor markers, but in reality, they are just enzymes that your body makes. Some cancer cells tend to make excess numbers of those enzymes, and then you can use them as a marker for tumors, hence the name tumor markers. And they're considered in a classification of different tumor markers, but they're actually normal enzymes that your body makes. Prednisone is an anti-inflammatory, affects the cytokines, possibly. I don't know. I cannot imagine, trying to think of the physiology. I don't know that they would. Maybe there's some weird physiological process that would cause tumor markers to go up, but I don't think so. I don't know that the chat is fixed on our, let's see. Tried to fix the chat. Dustin actually turned it off. I might have to ask him how to turn it back on. But so you can unmute yourself if you have any other questions. Okay, any other questions from anybody? All right, well, we will call it a night then. This is a short one. All right, thank you guys for participating, and we will make sure you get your questions in, and we'll talk to you again on Monday. Remember, all the Zoom calls are available. I try to get them up the same night. So, all right, thank you guys. Talk to you next week. Have a good weekend. Bye-bye.